Have you ever seen a word sharper than a sword? A single question that shakes empires, rattles kings, and awakens truths buried in silence. That question was why, and the man who mastered that question, Oriusidin, was called Socrates. He was no king, no general, he had no army, no wealth. Yet the entire city of Athens feared him, because Socrates didn't kill with weapons, he killed with questions. Our story begins not in a battlefield, but in a temple cloaked in mystery, the Temple of Delphi. This was where the voice of the god Apollo was believed to speak through a trance-bound oracle. One day, someone asked a dangerous question. Is there anyone wiser than Socrates? The oracle closed her eyes, inhaled deeply, and spoke just 2 words. No one. The entire city was stunned. Socrates was stunned. He had always said, I know that I know nothing. So if a man who claimed ignorance was declared the wisest of all by the gods, then either the gods were wrong, or the entire world was living in an illusion. Socrates wasn't satisfied. He didn't believe the oracle blindly. So he made a decision to disprove the gods. He began a strange kind of journey, a hunt for someone wiser than himself. He approached the politicians. Tell me, he asked them, what is justice? They replied, justice is what the law says. Socrates smiled, and if the law is unjust? He approached the poets. What is beauty? They danced with metaphors but couldn't answer directly. Then he met craftsmen. They could build tools but couldn't explain why we create or what purpose it serves. And slowly, the masks of the people fell away. Socrates saw it clearly. People were pretending to know what they didn't. They wore the costumes of wisdom, but inside there was only noise. And when he exposed this in public, the powerful grew uneasy. You might wonder, what did Socrates actually do wrong? He didn't kill. He didn't steal. But in every age, the most dangerous man is the one who asks questions. He questioned traditions, he questioned the gods, he questioned the very foundation of Athenian pride. He said, do not follow tradition blindly. Do not accept truth because it is popular. Listen to the whisper of your soul. And that whisper terrified those in power. To the rulers, he was a threat. To the priests, a heretic. To the crowd, a dangerous thinker. So they decided to silence him. The year was 399 BCE. Athens put Socrates on trial. The charges? Corrupting the youth, rejecting the city's gods, inventing new spiritual beings. He stood before 500 jurors alone, no lawyer, no theatrics, and he said, I never claimed to teach anyone anything. All I've ever done is ask questions, and if asking questions is a crime, then yes, I am guilty. He wasn't afraid, he wasn't angry, he was calm. The court declared the sentence death, poison, hemlock. Socrates accepted it without hesitation. He smiled and said, death is not the end. It is either a dreamless sleep or a journey of the soul to a place where real philosophers dwell. And with no resistance, he drank the poison. The man who unmasked society, who held up a mirror to the world, took his last breath. Not with fear, but with peace. But this is only the beginning, because Socrates wasn't just a man. He often spoke of a strange voice, a guiding force within him. He called it his daimonion, a divine voice that warned, advised, and stopped him from doing wrong. Was this just a metaphor? Or was Socrates truly guided by something not of this world? In part 2, we unlock the secrets of this inner voice and explore whether Socrates was touched by the divine or possessed by something far beyond human understanding. They say true madness is hearing a voice that no one else can hear. But what if that voice doesn't lead you into darkness, but into wisdom. Socrates, the greatest philosopher in history, claimed that he was guided by an inner voice, a mysterious force he called the daimonion. He never claimed it was a god, never said it spoke in words. Yet he trusted it more than anything, even in the face of death. So what was this strange presence? A guardian spirit? A fragment of his own soul? Or something more, otherworldly? From a young age, Socrates was different. While other children played and laughed, he would often stand motionless, eyes closed, as if listening to something only he could hear. He spoke of a presence, a gentle restraint. He said, "It never tells me what to do. It only tells me what not to do." And whenever he was about to take a wrong step, the daimonion would stop him, silently. It was not fear, not conscience. It was something else, an invisible companion. Many dismissed this as madness, but others weren't so sure. Some believed it was a personal deity, a spiritual guide assigned only to him. Others thought it was the purest voice of reason, so deeply connected to the soul that it felt divine. Modern minds call it intuition, but Socrates spoke of it as something sacred. He believed this voice came not from outside, but from the soul's connection to a higher reality, not emotion, not logic, something beyond. During the Peloponnesian War, Socrates served as a soldier. In one battle, all his instincts told him to charge forward, but the voice said no. He stood still, as arrows flew by. A moment later, the ground where he would have stepped was covered in blood. The soldiers mocked him, called him a coward, but those who survived began to whisper, "The gods speak to him." In public, Socrates never used the voice for prediction. He didn't claim to be a prophet. But when his friend Chaerephon asked the Oracle of Delphi, "Is anyone wiser than Socrates?" and the answer was no one, Socrates was shocked. He went to the daimonion, and for the first time, it remained silent. He realized something. His role was not to teach. His role was to wake people up. He said, "I am the gadfly, and Athens is a sluggish horse. I sting it to keep it awake." In the final days of his life, when the trial ended and death was certain, his friends begged him to escape. One of them had bribed the guards. The doors were open. The city was asleep. But as Socrates stepped forward, the voice returned. "Do not run." He stopped, took a deep breath, and said, "I must obey the voice, for I have obeyed it all my life, and it has never been wrong." He chose death over disobedience. But why? To this day, no one knows what the daimonion truly was. Some say it was divine guidance, others a deep subconscious intuition far ahead of its time. But one thing is certain. Socrates believed in something within himself, more than the laws of men, more than the fear of death, more than logic itself. And maybe that's the real secret, that inside all of it, there's a voice, a whisper. Most ignore it. Socrates listened, and it made him eternal. But there's one last chapter in this story, because long after Socrates' death, his ideas didn't vanish. They grew stronger, passed down to a young man, a student who would carry his torch, a student who would build a world of philosophy, and become the mentor of Alexander the Great. In part 3, we uncover the last legacy, how Socrates created the minds that changed the world. They killed the man, but they couldn't kill the idea. Socrates drank the poison. His breath slowed. His voice fell silent. But his final word echoed louder than any sword or scream ever could. The unexamined life is not worth living. That idea, like a spark, lit a fire that would shape the minds of two men, and those two men would go on to shape the world. In the crowd, watching his beloved teacher die, was a young man named Plato. He didn't speak. He didn't cry. But something inside him shattered, and something else awakened. He withdrew from society, vanished from Athens, and began writing, not just words, but the soul of Socrates preserved forever in dialogue. Plato became the voice Socrates no longer had, and through him Socrates lived again. Years later, Plato returned, not to rule, not to fight, but to teach. He founded a school called the Academy, a sacred place where minds could question everything. Logic, ethics, politics, astronomy, metaphysics. All were debated, doubted, broken, rebuilt. At the gates of the Academy was a sign: "Let no one ignorant of geometry enter." Plato didn't want believers. He wanted seekers. And he taught one student, who would become his greatest legacy. That student's name was Aristotle. He was sharp, rational, relentless. Where Socrates questioned and Plato imagined, Aristotle organized. He created the first system of logic, wrote about biology, ethics, government, even the soul. To Aristotle, philosophy wasn't just thinking, it was living, asking the right questions with the right method to reach truth. And he didn't just write scrolls, he trained kings. Among Aristotle's many students, one stood above them all, a young prince, fiery and curious. Aristotle taught him the epics, the stars, the nature of power and justice. That student became Alexander the Great, the man who would conquer the known world, not just with sword, but with ideas. Wherever Alexander went, he didn't just build cities, he built libraries. He spread the Greek language, Greek thought, and Greek philosophy, from Egypt to India. The teachings of Socrates, passed through Plato and Aristotle, now flowed across continents. And here's the strange beauty of it all. Socrates never wrote a single book, never started a school, never sought fame. He simply asked questions. But those questions created a chain of minds. Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Alexander. The modern world without Socrates, there is no Western philosophy, no ethics, no science as we know it, no democracy, no logic, no critical thought. He was the stone dropped in the pond, and we are still riding the ripples. Over 2,400 years later, the world has changed. We have machines, skyscrapers, artificial intelligence, but we still ask, who am I? What is good? Why do I suffer? What is truth? The questions of Socrates have outlived kings, empires, religions, even time itself. And maybe that was the point. He didn't want to give answers. He wanted us to never stop asking. Because the moment we stop questioning, we stop living. So what was Socrates? A madman? A martyr? A messenger from the gods? Or simply, a man who listened to a quiet voice inside and dared to follow it? In the end, maybe that's all we need. A question, a voice, and the courage to obey it. This was the story of Socrates, the man who taught the world how to think. Subscribe to Ancient Philosopher for more forgotten wisdom, lost voices, and the ancient mysteries that still shape our souls today.